What is the line between life and death? We believe we know it when we see it. It's the absence of a heartbeat, the lack of breath, a body that grows cold and still. It is a final, irreversible state. But what if it isn't? What if the very thing that is supposed to kill you, the bitter, invasive cold, is the one thing that decides to save you? This is not a story about a near-death experience. This is the story of a woman who was, by every medical definition, completely and totally dead. She wasn't just cold, she was frozen solid. And then, in a moment that defied all known science, her body came back to life. This story begins in the dead of winter, on the night of December 20th, 1980, in Lyngby, Minnesota. The cold on this night was not just cold, it was an active, violent force. The temperature was 22 degrees below zero, not counting the wind chill, which plunged the feels-like temperature into a realm that was simply uninhabitable for human life. The air was so cold, it felt like tiny needles in your lungs with every breath. 19-year-old Jean Hilliard was driving home from a night out with friends. Her car, a small Ford Fairmont, was not built for this kind of Arctic assault. Suddenly, the car began to sputter. It hit a patch of ice, skidded, and slid gracefully into a ditch. The engine died. Jean was stranded in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, in a cold that could kill a person in under an hour. She knew she couldn't stay in the car. It was a metal coffin that would only slow the cold down, not stop it. She knew a friend, Wally Nelson, lived just 2 miles down the road. 2 miles. In normal weather, it was a casual walk. Tonight, it was a desperate gamble for her life. Dressed in her winter coat, mittens, and cowboy boots, she got out of the car and began to walk. The cold was immediate. It wasn't just on her skin. It felt like it was inside her bones. She walked against a brutal wind that stole her breath and froze her eyelashes solid. The 2 miles felt like 20. Her legs, clad only in jeans, grew numb, then stiff, then uncooperative. They no longer felt like a part of her. They felt like wooden stilts she was dragging through the snow. She wasn't just getting cold, she was freezing. Hypothermia was setting in, clouding her mind. She became confused, disoriented. But she kept moving, driven by one single image: Wally Nelson's driveway. She finally saw it, the small, warm light of his house, a beacon of salvation in the crushing darkness. She stumbled up the long driveway, her body failing. She was yards from the door. She could see the porch. She raised her hand to knock, and that's when her body gave its last final command. She collapsed, 15 feet from the door. She couldn't get up. She couldn't scream. She could only lie there, her eyes open, staring at the warm light of the house she couldn't reach. As the 22 below zero night began its final work, she lay there, freezing solid, for 6 hours. At 7 a.m., Wally Nelson opened his front door to let his dog out. He almost didn't see her. He thought it was a piece of ice, a drift of snow. Then he saw the shape. It was Jean, but it wasn't Jean. It was a statue, a human icicle. Her body was frozen solid, stiff as a log. Her eyes were wide open, her face pale and icy, frozen in a mask of silent desperation. Wally was a rugged Minnesota man, used to the cold, but this was a sight from a horror movie. He grabbed her. She didn't bend. Her arms were rigid. He said later it was like lifting a frozen piece of meat. He managed to clunk her into the back of his pickup truck. She could be bent into the front seat, tanned, raced to the small local hospital. When he arrived at the emergency room, the nurses and doctors were stunned into silence. They had seen hypothermia. They had never seen this. Dr. George Sather, the physician on duty, examined her. His face was a mask of grim professionalism, but inside, he knew this was a lost cause. He couldn't get a temperature. The thermometer wouldn't register that low. Her skin was like polished marble, so hard and frozen that a hypodermic needle snapped in half when he tried to inject her. Her joints were frozen solid. Her jaw was frozen shut. Her eyes were open, her pupils fixed and dilated, a classic sign of brain death. They couldn't find a pulse. They couldn't detect a breath. By every single medical textbook, every rule, every definition, Jean Hilliard was dead. The other staff looked at Dr. Sather, their expressions asking the unspoken question, what's the point? Where do we even begin? This wasn't a patient. It was a corpse. But Dr. Sather decided to try one last, desperate, illogical thing. They couldn't treat her, but maybe they could thaw her. The decision was made to warm her up, not with any real hope of reviving her, but because it was the only thing they could do. They surrounded her frozen body with hot, wet heating pads. This is where the story turns from a tragedy into a medical impossibility. What the doctors didn't know is that the human body has a fail-safe, a remnant of our ancient biology, sometimes called the mammalian diving reflex. When the body gets that cold, that fast, it can enter a state of suspended animation. The cold that was killing her was also, in a way, protecting her. It slowed her metabolism down to almost zero. Her heart wasn't beating, but it didn't need to. Her brain wasn't getting oxygen, but it didn't need oxygen because it was frozen, preserved. She was, in essence, a human popsicle, a body in perfect, frozen stasis. For hours, the medical team worked, watching, waiting. They were simply warming a corpse. And then, something happened. Around 11 a.m., one of the nurses thought she heard a sound. A faint, low-frequency moan. A gasp. The team rushed over. They put a stethoscope to her chest, and they heard it. A faint, impossibly slow heartbeat. 2 or 3 beats per minute. A flicker, then another. It was impossible. Her body, as it thawed, began to convulse violently. It was a terrifying, uncontrolled tremor, the systems of her body trying to reboot all at once. Her frozen, rigid limbs began to relax. Her color began to change from a waxy, pale gray to a blotchy red. She was, quite literally, coming back to life. By noon, she was conscious. But the team was bracing for the inevitable, tragic outcome. Even if she survived, the damage would be catastrophic. The frostbite would have destroyed her limbs. She would certainly lose both her legs and arms. And her brain, starved of oxygen for hours, would be gone. She would be, as they grimly called it, a vegetable. A nurse held her hand. Jean's eyes, no longer frozen, began to move. She looked at the nurse, and then, in a hoarse, rattling whisper, she spoke. Her first words were simple. "I'm cold." The staff erupted. It wasn't just a body that had come back. It was her. Her recovery was not just a miracle. It was a medical impossibility. The doctors prepared for the amputations, but as the days went on, her legs, which had been frozen solid, regained their color and feeling. The frostbite was severe, but it was superficial. By the end of the week, she was wiggling her toes. After 49 days in the hospital, Jean Hilliard walked out, completely intact, no brain damage, no lost limbs, not even a significant scar. The doctors had no explanation. They called it a 1 in a billion chance, a perfect convergence of factors, her youth, the speed of the freezing, the dry, deep cold that had preserved her instead of destroying her. She had been dead, a block of ice with no pulse and no breath. But the cold, her executioner, had also been her savior. It had paused her life, holding her on the very brink of death until the world was ready to bring her back.